I want to pick up from the previous panel, Manisha, where Geeta mentioned that she would have to work on the prototype and go 2 steps ahead to sort of make sure that she's heard, she's taken seriously, right? We've seen some studies when it comes to board. I don't want to necessarily make this a gender conversation, but we've seen studies of Norwegian boards, right? Norway was the first country to say that women on boards and mandate the number of women on boards. Then, of course, India did it, and we're still in the process of, we're still not able to get our public sector listed entities to get the required number of women on the board. Do you believe, as you meet women and men entrepreneurs and founders, because of this pressure, oh, I have to get taken seriously, oh, I have to appear, if not sort of 2 steps ahead, but equal to my male counterpart or a founder who may be eyeing for the same pot of gold, they go above and beyond to be more transparent, as Naya put it, and sort of get things right from the word go?
I mean, firstly, I loved what you said. I totally agree because, growing up, all our conversations were, are you going to be an engineer or a banker or a doctor? The first generation, guys, of you entrepreneurs who are dreaming big. It makes me feel so good because, as a banker, I would go to people and bank them, and it either had to be that they were close to the government so they could get the licenses, or, they were second generation, third generation. Here are you women dreaming big. So, there's a lot of noise, and it's, our job to talk about the noise, but you should feel proud what you're doing. It was unthinkable when I started. If I told the very fact that when I started UBS and Moelis in India, my father, who's a career bureaucrat, had a complete meltdown. He was like, what am I going to tell my Delhi Golf Club friends? What is Moelis, right? I mean, please stay in Grindlays, which is where I started. So that was the resistance to change, to even bootstrapping a global firm. And here are Naya and Upasana who've gone and bootstrapped amazing firms. Having said that, there is no question there is unconscious bias in your industry too. Unfortunately, whether it's VCs, whether it's PEs, they all tend to be male dominated. Everyone's hiring that token woman. I think it'll take time. They're hiring them at the younger junior levels. It'll take time for them to come up the ladder and become CEOs and heads of the firms, and hopefully they'll stay. But unfortunately, we all have these unconscious biases, and we want to go out, give capital or go out for a drink with people who we think are similar, like-minded. It's awkward to go out for a drink with a woman if you're a male PE or a male VC investor. So all of the complexities basically create issues for women. So it's very hard for women to go out and raise capital. I don't think that's the only reason that drives women to be above board. I think that's our nature, right? I mean, if you see year after year, if you open the newspaper, the people who top every school is a woman, right? So generally, we tend to be far more diligent. Me and my husband started off our careers exactly doing the same job. Sanjay would come in, tie half worn, hurtling in at 8:50, at 9 a.m. we were supposed to start. Hurtling in at 8:45, 8:55. There was a brand called Nirula's, buying a coffee from there and hurtling in. I would be there at 8:30, everything set on my desk, my eraser, my pencil, as if I'm in school, right? But and by the way, to date, we earn dollar for dollar the same. So I'm not sure this is a great theory, but that's just how we are. We are just diligent, conscientious people with an eye for detail. That's our personality. And I think that's what we carry into the entrepreneur world too. So I don't think, of course, we try harder. There's no question, we do try harder because, we do get a rough deal. But I don't think it's just the fact that I need to, the ecosystem's driving me to it. I'm by nature conscientious, and I think the world needs us to prove that. And I see that on boards too, right? And a lot of the boards, I'm the only woman on the board, and I try harder. I read up everything. I read every piece of paper before I go in because, if I'm on the board of a truck company, they probably think, what is she doing here? I remember, it's my favorite story. It's like, I'm on the board of this truck company, and when you join a board, the founder gets the team to come and brief you on the business. So the head of commercial vehicles came in to brief me, and he looked at me. I don't think he anticipated there's going to be a woman. And he looked at me, and he put the presentation up, and it had a truck, and he said, that is a truck. And I was like, yes, that is amazing. But, and to date, he's my dear friend. But he himself says, he was so psyched that what are you going to tell a woman about a truck? And today, a lot of the truck drivers are women, right? So that's how it's evolved. But yeah, I mean, long story, but because I'm so passionate about this, I just wanted to make the point that all of you are conscientious and keep that going because that will sustain you in the long run. In the short term, maybe, Sanjay coming in with a half-worn tie will win, but in the long run, I'll get there and be as good. So keep it up and keep it going that way.
Okay, I'll now open the floor for questions. I know Radhika had some questions for the panelists as well. And of course, you can think of others in the meantime and address the panelists.
Because I've spoken with y'all individually, I love the stories that y'all shared on gender biases, and I think biases can only be addressed when stories are shared. So starting with you, Naya, you told me about how you entered into an investor room and what kind of feedback did you get, because we have so many young founders here and they really unfortunately don't know how to tackle with it. To those who know, kudos, but I'd love to hear your story as to how did you tackle it through.
So I just want to call out one thing. I mean, how amazing is Radhika? Like, isn't she absolutely amazing? And yes. And let me tell you this, right? So, she kept on reaching out to my PR team, and my PR team kept on saying, nahi, nahi, nahi. And I was like, 1 second, ye emails mere inbox mein aate ja rahe, ye Radhika hai kaun? Then I went back and I checked, she's young, she's vibrant, she's got a person. I was like, we must do this. So pretty much one of those rare times I basically said, dude, like, I don't care, I'm showing up and I'm doing this with her. And I'm just amazed. I told Radhika as well, I'm just inspired by her resilience, by her determination, by her grit, right? I think it's really inspiring to me. Now, the story, I think the story's been told a few times, but let me tell you very quickly what she's referring to. This is when, I just come back from Boston, I just graduated from Harvard, and I was like, I'm going to just take over the world, and, I'm super ambitious and blah, blah, and everything else. And I walked into an angel investor's office, and I basically said, I'm here to build Baby Chakra. It's going to change the way parenting happens in India, the need of the hour, healthcare, make everything, right? Tech, everything. And I think the only question he looked at me and said was, but what happens when you become pregnant? And I was like, I was stunned, right? I was absolutely stunned. And, just keep in mind that I've had someone, my mom's been an amazing, she's a bureaucrat, she's been an amazing role model, extremely strong women figures in my life. I was at McKinsey, very honestly, extremely equal, very, very egalitarian firm, very meritocratic firm. I have had the best experience. HBS, very, very equal. You talked about gender, never experienced anything myself. And I was here and I was like, what, are you kidding me? And then in my head, I was like, isn't that great for business? Like, if I'm pregnant, I'm running Baby Chakra. But I didn't know how to respond at that point in time. It was one of my first investor meetings. I was not maybe, I was still trying to find my feet. And I remember just walking out. Now, what I was telling Radhika is what I would do very differently. And by the way, I met him again when we'd done our Series A. And he met me at a social event. And he says, Naya, the one regret I had was not investing in your company. And I was feeling quite vindicated. At the same time, I could help it. At the same time, I remember thinking that I should have done better in responding to him at that point in time and saying, hey, listen, we need to talk about this. But it was one of those very, so where am I leading with this, right? Now I'm a little bit different. If I find I'm in a situation of maybe unconscious or specifically conscious bias, I do call it out. I've had a few years of, experience and I think a lot of confidence now to call that out. And I'd encourage all of you to do the same. Call it out politely but firmly. Call it out. Because if you don't, that same experience is going to be reiterated with someone in the next pitch conversation. So I think it is our beholden duty to call it out now. So yeah, that was my journey, really.
Thanks for sharing that. I think after you spoke about that, a lot of people will watch our interview. They have to. But I think Upasana has to go quickly. So I'll ask the question first before we come to the panel again. Upasana, tell me about some of the unconscious gender bias that you've faced. Because being in fintech, we rarely see any women, but it's slowly changing with examples like yourself. So tell me some of the instances where you really got shocked. How can this question even come to me? I'm here pitching before you. I'm ambitious. Why are you even asking me this question? So can you tell us about some of those moments?
Yeah, sure. I think that, you rightfully said, and by the way, we're speaking about bias and difficulties that we face as women. I want to say very honestly and transparently, I've had a similar incident as Naya and many others as well. But there is also bias and discrimination, by the way, that we face from other women. For example, I want to tell you all that a prominent women-oriented magazine, in India once, had written to us maybe 5-6 years ago. And then once they figured out what we do at MobiKwik and what I do and what my background is, which is bachelor's and master's in engineering and not an MBA, what they said is that this is too technical for our audience. If you were doing like, a fashion company or a cosmetics company or a luxury goods or even boutique travel, then maybe, it would be worthwhile for our readers to know what Upasana does. But what you're doing is like so technical that we don't think that our readers will, like it. So I was just like appalled. I was like, we don't want Indian women to know how to make payments. We don't want Indian women to know how to improve their finances. So that's the kind of, funny things that you hear. I think that this bias is fairly, deep rooted, where somehow we tend to discount that, when people talk about, shooting, things into orbit in space, people think of men. When it is hardcore finance, when it's hardcore engineering, people just think of men for whatever reasons. So I think that has been a challenge. I can also tell you that I've also faced situations where I have interviewed people, and I interview all the leaders that get hired in MobiKwik. Once upon a time, I used to interview everyone. And I've also had people like an engineer from some, IIT telling me कि आप मेरा क्या इंटरव्यू लोगे? मैंने कहा बॉस मैंने एमएस की है स्टैनफोर्ड से, तू क्या मेरे को बोल रहा है? अभी के अभी निकल, मेरे को तेरा इंटरव्यू ही नहीं लेना है. Get out of here. We have no place for arrogant pricks like you. So all kinds of crap, you face, and it's just ridiculous. And like Maya said, I think that there are situations where I am, very aggressive about it. In other situations, I may be a little subtle, but I'm definitely clear, to call it out. And I've had a CXO once who was hired by me to, lead sales for us. And after 3 months, when he was not performing and we called him out, he said that, I don't want to report to you. I will report to Bipin, your male co-founder. I was like, ye koi baat nahi hai. You are not able to do your work. What have I done, for this? Anyway, I was still, okay, we managed the expectations. We said, okay, we'll give you 2 more months and we'll change your reporting also. And there was no change. And ultimately, he had to leave. But I mean, these are sort of the things that happen. Like people don't expect that, women will be bossy or women will be strong in, some areas. And it's unfortunate. And I think we have to fight through that. So I am, for one, very keen that I want more and more women to do things that are not typically associated that women will be good at this. I mean, we can be fashionable, but we can also be geeky.
And I think the worst was, I'm sure a lot of you would have seen this. This is a little ad, right? Firang kindergarten kids who've been given professions. Okay, draw a doctor, draw a firefighter, draw an astronaut, draw a nurse. And these are kindergarten kids we've shaped at 3 and 4 years of age already to think that all these astronaut can only be a guy, firefighter can only be a guy, and a surgeon can only be a guy, and a nurse and a cook has to be a woman. So imagine, I mean, we're not talking India, we're talking like Western markets, where you would think that, the gender biases would have gotten diluted, but I clearly not, where like kids of 3-4 years of age are drawing men when you think of professions which have been conventionally male dominated.
Yeah, that's so true. And Upasana, a very important point on, gender bias being coming to women from women only. I mean, I heard one of my interviews with Silicon Valley founder. She told me that when you rise to the top, it's so important to send the elevator back down, because otherwise how will others come up and how will you see more and more women on top? But Manisha, your story has been very interesting to me. And you've, grown up in a small town in Shimla, and you've seen many struggles of your life. But you also told me about the fact that how the analysts at the same age with same experience, the male colleagues would get to sit in client meetings, and you would be told to get coffee or pizza for the clients. And I so much loved when you said that, I just wanted to see that what does it really take for me to get recognized. That statement was so bold enough. So why don't you share that instance with our audience today?
Please tell us you added a ton of chilies if you got the popular.
Firstly, I don't even know how to boil water. So, I was just this the wrongest person to be asked for this. So, yeah, I think, look, when I started in investment banking 30 years ago, there were women, right? As Upasana said, women can be geeks, women can understand math, we can understand balance sheets, cash flows, but nobody got that, right? There just weren't enough people in the business for people to know that there would be women. So, when we would go on road shows across the world, when we were assisting companies to raise capital, there would be all sorts of awkward situations. For example, once we went to London, this is a state-owned company, we took 20 people from the government to a road show, and one of them, and today there's all sorts of veganism and everything, right? So there's a lot of options available for Indians, but that time things were very hard, and we went to, the deal closed, and we went for a celebration to a high-end grill restaurant in Savoy, and the food was pork ribs, beef, and for the vegetarians there was one broccoli, that was it. So during the day we make our clients work really hard, as you would know, right? Meet 10 investors, really sing for your supper. So the poor CFO, he was a Jain and he was diabetic and he had a complete fit, and he said, I need dal chawal now. And like, dal chawal in Savoy, I mean, the poor, in those days the Brits are like, what the hell is that, right? So 25 people sitting on a long table and 24 are looking at me and saying, now you need to go into the kitchen and produce the dal chawal. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely, and I'm like, firstly, I don't even know how to boil water, so I'm like the wrongest person. But that's how much the prejudice was that if she's here, then the dal chawal will come. So of course I go into the kitchen, neither me nor the chef has any clue, and there's no Google to say YouTube, let's go and find out what a dal recipe is. And to date, I remember my male colleague who came in and cooked some Indian food, and of course I presented it as mine, and but that's how seeped in patriarchy life is. And like Upasana said, we all women are so subconsciously carrying this patriarchy torch forward. At one point I realized I myself carry it forward. Initially when I had my daughter, not to throw my poor husband under the bus, but I want to do it one more time. Everyone would ask me, including Tara's school teachers, how do you do it? You take red eyes, you have these crazy schedules. And I would very nicely say, oh, it's all thanks to my husband. And I was like, bullshit, why do I say this? What is thanks to Sanjay? Just because he went for one birthday party with Tara. And I'm like, wow, he's so nice. Sunday evening, he went for a birthday party and let me do a pedicure. But that's how seeped we are, because I felt gratitude that he was doing 15% of the share of parenting, right? And no, not 15, 0.5, I would say. But that's how we are, right? And so each one of you must shake that, because we feel gratitude when and a lot of you are young, as you get married or live with your partners. Don't feel gratitude. We signed up for 50-50 parenting, 50-50 housekeeping, and in my case, of course, 100% of the housekeeping was done by Sanjay, since I didn't know the difference between pudina and dhania, so I've come a long way. But yeah, I just wanted to make the point that please shake the patriarchy. I faced a lot of it, as Radhika said, go down, get the coffee, go down, get the burger. That's what my value add was. Nobody gave me the models or the financial aspects of it. I had to really ask for it. Nobody would send me to smaller towns because it was not safe. In fact, I remember I once volunteered to go and do a textile company model, and there was no women's bathroom. So, I had to actually go and use the toilet which was there for the sweepers and the housekeepers, because I was the only one that I was allowed to go to. So those were different times. But, all of you out there, just please shake the patriarchy off. It's not easy, but, at least all of you be the torchbearers for each one, as you said, for each one of you, because, as Naya said, we owe it to each other. It's just too deep-rooted, and, people are too judgmental. I remember meetings I would go into when we go to pitch for business. When the client got friendly with me, they would ask me, so when are you going to be on the family way? What is family? Firstly, what is family way? Well, I mean, if I have a husband, I have parents, I'm already in a family. But it meant like, and 9 years into marriage, I still didn't have my only child, and they were like, there's something really wrong with this woman. She's either, unfaithful to her husband, or she has some kind of, so, that's the kind of prejudices I face. No male colleague sitting next to me ever got asked those questions. I got asked those questions again and again, and, with a grin and a smile, but I don't think you people should do it. As she said, call it out, because, you owe it to each other to call it out.
I just want to add one perspective here. It's a little bit philosophical, so bear with me, everybody. I interact with thousands of mothers. I have the privilege of doing that, right, with Baby Chakra, and also just generally now, I think it's become like and I think the important thing is, if you really just take a really big step back, we're actually playing in a world where the rules and the games have actually been defined by men all these years. right? And we all know it. But if you really think about it, why is, for instance, cooking, or why is nursing, or why is caring, or why is childbearing not considered important, right? Because it was never attributed any financial value to by the men who set the rules for the construct that we live in today. So I think one really big step back, if we can all do together as men and women, and basically start giving, maybe not financial value, maybe that's too much of an extreme situation today, but if we start giving the respect that these caring, nurturing roles actually have in our life, right, be it delivered by men or by women, I think that would be an incredible movement forward. There are so many amazing, accomplished women and men, right? Men today, by the way, right? I think the generation is changing. A lot of men actually want, not many, but a lot of men, and they will lead the change as well, right? And lead the change in narrative. They want to play caring roles. They want to play nurturing, caregiver roles in their families, right? But if you look at schools, what happens today? You go to a parent-teacher meeting, right? If that one man shows up, the moms groups may not include him in the WhatsApp groups, right? Or if he shows up and he says, the schools will say, I get mails today as well saying Mrs. Rao. I'm not Mrs. Rao, I'm Miss Sagi, by the way, still. And I haven't taken my husband's name. My husband writes all the mails to the school, but they address us as a unit as Mrs. Rao, assuming that my husband plays no role. I think that's where even in our organizations, and as founders, CEOs, entrepreneurs ourselves, right? Managers, leaders ourselves, let's take a step back. Let's reframe the rules we've been playing with, and let's give men and women the respect, the time, the space, and I think the push they need to play the role that we actually need as society, is the role of caregivers, of nourishers, of people who actually can take care of families. I think it's very important. I just want to call it out.
Yeah, and I'm going to deprive them of more stories so that they watch the show, which is Wiping Out the Norm. It's available across social media channels.
I'm glad in the previous panel, Radhika brought up the frigid winter term. So let me start with getting a mood check from all three of you. I'll come to you first, Upasna. Manisha, sorry. The banker in you now is assessing, I'm guessing, value in the market and looking at startups which, let's say, are hold a promise, and among the entire headline of, hey, look, a funding issue here, sour relationship there, how are startups currently reacting to this funding winter, and what you and the investors are looking for in the market right now? So where is the action?
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Good evening. This is just a delight to see so many women in a room. In my office, they say I hunt women. Not in a bad way, guys, but but they say if you want a job with Manisha, just wax your legs and wear a skirt and she'll hire you. So this is amazing to see all of you here, and such an energetic lot. So thank you for everyone for being here on a rainy day. I was telling Radhika in the morning that, are you sure you want to have the event? And she was like, these are women, they will come. So here they are. So to address your question, I think, look, this is a painful but a much needed correction. And businesswomen who are run strong businesses like Naya and Upasna will tell you that that's the case. It's tough times. Today India has about 95,000 startups, of which 7,500 are funded. 100 are unicorns. We all know those statistics. We all thought that these numbers would be, galloping around. When we were speaking last year, anyone from my organization who had a term sheet and a good idea could get funded and would quit and either become the CFO or CEO of a startup. That party is over, and I think it's great it's over. It's painful, and it's going to go through a lot of pain for investors, for founders. But it was just too much froth, right? Funded by what we all know what was happening in the US, just too much money, too much liquidity, and it was trying to find a home. What's happening, and why do I say it's good? It's good because the strong, robust business models will come out on top, which is like what happens in every sector, right? In telecom, we had this shakeout. I don't know how many of you remember that. We had like 7, 8 telecom players consolidated now into 2.5. I say half because Vodafone sort of, I was on Vodafone, couldn't hear anyone, so I call it half. But yeah, so I think a much needed consolidation is needed in every sector, and businesses which have strong cash flows, which talk cash flows firstly, which talk EBITDA, should be the ones who survive. And that's what's happening. And, you know, players who are strong are basically going to consolidate, expand, and come out much bigger and better, and, you know, outshine all the others. So I'm very positive on this. I know it's easier said than done. If you're a founder, then you would hate hearing what I'm saying, because, you know, a lot of them had put their heart and soul, and unfortunately the liquidity is just completely gone out of the market. But in the long run, India will come out much better. I worked for 30 years, and I've seen this in sector after sector. There was initially in telecom, there was a frenzy. Anyone who got a license had $1 billion valuation, and then it consolidated. Similarly, media, all sector after sector, I can talk through that. So that's what's going through in tech. It's more widespread because, as I said, there are 90,000 startups, but I'm happy with this change.
Okay, with this optimism that where there is value, those people will find money. I've broken the conversation into 3 Ps so that, you know, it's easier for us to take the key takeaways from the insights all 3 panelists will bring in. I'm going to talk product, pricing, and policies. Naya, I'll come to you first on the product bit, okay? As I was prepping for it, I came across a McKinsey report which sort of said that about half the startups fail because they get the pricing wrong, right? When you're out there, and please join each one of you from your personal experiences on how you navigated that for your business and your clients, how do you get the pricing right? Do you just look at competition? Do you just look at consumer appetite? What are those elements that you need to look at and study to get that pricing right?
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. So I think a very, very tough question to answer in 2 minutes, because pricing is one of the toughest problems I think entrepreneurs face, right? And I'm ex-McKinsey. I probably would have been one of those contributing to that report that was put out there in another avatar of mine. But I don't think anybody really knows the answer. I think the answer really comes from the consumers, right? And I think the whole effort that we as entrepreneurs constantly make is to constantly be in touch with our consumers to understand what is the value we are creating for our consumers with the product or the service you're bringing to market. So I really wish I had this really beautiful answer out, you know, that was, oh, this is how you go about discovering the right price, but really price is all about discovering the right value that your product is bringing to your consumers and how much are they willing to pay for it, and how effectively, very importantly, how effectively you're able to demonstrate what is the opportunity cost for not paying for it. I think that is really beautiful. I mean, if you look at India, you know, and I think, of course, we'll all say India is an extremely price-sensitive market, and absolutely it is. You know, it is a very, very discount-led market. Absolutely it is. But India is also one of the biggest markets for the Apple iPhone. Now, how do you triangulate the multiple Indias that exist, right? We are looking at India that is also now poised to be one of the biggest luxury markets there is, right? I was in France recently on work and a family holiday, and had a lot of conversations there with, you know, with manufacturers and with folks in the beauty industry. And I think the excitement they have about India as a market is something that is really palpable. So I think, you know, when you're, as an entrepreneur, when you think about pricing, it's a matter of discovery, a lot of conversations. I'll tell you 2 things very quickly that we at the Good Glam Group have done, right? The Good Glam Group actually is almost a digital-first FMCG conglomerate, if you will, right? Because we have a whole bunch of amazing brands, right? From My Glam, which is one of India's top 3 beauty and cosmetics brand. We have Momsco Baby Chakra in the mom baby portfolio, again, market leaders there. We have Sirona Hygiene, the largest menstrual cup seller in the country, and intimate hygiene being something that we've been extremely passionate about and seen, you know, ghar ghar basically Sirona jana chahiye. Organic Harvest, you know, sort of spearheading organic care, organic beauty or sustainable beauty, and of course Saint Botanica. Some of these are brands I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Now, all of these brands have, you know, for instance, My Glam, right, has My Glam. It has Manish Malhotra, which is a very premium range cosmetic product company, like, you know, sub-brand. And then, of course, we have PopXO, which is at the, you know, more college, early jobber range, right? So I think as entrepreneurs ourselves, how we think about pricing is that, you know, we try out at different price points what sticks based on the consumer segment that we are building for. We do a lot of price discovery conversations, and then we work backwards in ensuring the formulations, the marketing efforts, the packaging, the experience overall really, really meets the promise of the pricing that we eventually bring to market.
Okay, Manisha, come in here that when you talk to founders and advise them on some of the market dynamics, what are those 2 or 3 elements that you tell them to take care of when they're pricing the product? As Naya said, that we're a very price-sensitive market. So do you tell them, hey, look, go try this out for 6 months, see what sticks, and be agile enough to then come back to the drawing board and change those aspects? Does it then does the perception of your product then change if you make it cheaper or if you make it more expensive? How to play with some of these parameters?
So I think, look, this is, what Naya mentioned is not unique to what's happening in the tech world. Basically, India has been a very cost-conscious country right from the beginning. Now, the key thing when I advise corporates across sectors and not just founders is to say, which is your TAM, right? You need to figure out. As Naya said, if you're looking at the Manish Malhotra brand, then I assume, Naya, that your TAM is smaller, right? You're looking at the upper middle class, et cetera, et cetera. So I think figure your TAM out, and I think that's where a lot of the global brands went wrong in India initially, when there just wasn't buying power, right? I mean, can you imagine my mom buying a LV? She'll have a meltdown. She'll be like, I can buy 2 Marutis in this. What are you talking about, right? So you need to know which your market is. And I think till at least my mom's generation, you just weren't going to buy these luxury brands. Now what's happening is fabulous because of all the wealth that's been created in India through ESOPs, higher salaries, etc. Is that the urban middle class is being upwardly mobile and wants to buy better things, better education, health, brands, for their children and for themselves, have better vacations. So I think figure out your TAM is the most important thing. I mean, and I think Upasana and I should talk about it, but I think it's very difficult to first go out there, Paiswani, and just say, look, let's just go try out for 6 months and then course correct, because the consumer then has a perception in the mind, right? And I've seen a lot of luxury brands then pivot and say, now I'm going to go to tier 2 and tier 3 cities where really the girls are and the women are buying these luxury brands, and I'm going to pivot it into that. It doesn't work because, in the mind of the consumer, the brand has a certain perception, and then you burn a lot of money in basically trying to pivot it. So I would say much rather spend some time initially, understand your market, understand where you want to take this brand, business, whatever it may be, and this holds across sectors, and then launch your business, even if it means 6 months later. Course correcting, then basically maybe you launch adjacencies or launch related brands if then you want to go and address that market. But I think today the market is exciting. There's incomes are high in even not just in big cities. Earlier if a global business was coming into India, we would say just look at the 4 cities and it's all over. It's not the case anymore. There's a lot of buying power in smaller cities, and the market is big. So I think it's a really exciting time to launch your business in India, because just the size of the market, right? And the aspirations that all of us Indians have. We want to travel. We want to go and stay in the best of hotels. The other day, I wanted to book for a colleague of mine coming from the US a room in Haridwar and Rishikesh, and I thought 4,000 rupees is a great hotel, and I got the quotes and it said 35,000 rupees. I'm like, maybe I should redirect him to Positano or something. But that's how Indians are spending. It's great, right? I mean, because I don't think my clients in the hotels business had that kind of revenues earlier, and then I went and looked at all the balance sheets of the hotels, and they're booming, right? So it's great. So I think it's great time to be a founder today. I know capital is constrained, but that will come back. It's gone. The pendulum always swings to the extreme, like it did first towards excess liquidity and now towards dried up liquidity. But I don't think it takes away from the fact that this is the most exciting market to be across segments, and whether it's investors or whether it's global strategics or whether it's Indians, I think invest your capital into India, because this is really where the business is. This is my sales pitch, guys.
No, but I just want to just bump up what she said. I mean, absolutely. I think in the founder circuit, this is an aspiration economy. And of course, we're a brand-starved country still, right? So I think that's really where the opportunity really lies.
Upasana, we've let you be quiet for a while now. Come in here. From product pricing, I want to now move to product scalability. Tell me that, a growing consumer base is what every founder aspires for. And just when I went to her, I've lost her. Manisha, come in here in the meantime. I'll direct that question to Upasana when she's back with us. How do you plan for scalability? Do you think of it on day one? Or sort of once you have a solid footing with your initial consumer base is when you figure out how to scale it? And what's a good strategy to begin with here?
So, since I'm a dinosaur in the business, let me tell you my example of Infosys, right? Infosys is one of the most fantastic companies today, $40-50 billion in market cap. We used to do their equity offerings through ADRs, through US listings back in 15-20 years ago. And Narayana Murthy and Nandan were always asked this, right? When are you going to be that billion-dollar company? When are you going to have the billion-dollar revenues? And they articulated their vision very well on how they're going to get to a billion-dollar company. But they always said it's step by step, right? They didn't get carried away that, we're going to get $1 billion revenues and on that we're going to get a multiple of valuation, so let's just talk that. Vision, yes, everyone wants to hear the vision. But what's more important is execution, execution, and execution. And I think that's where they were razor focused. And so I think, when you're an entrepreneur, you start up, obviously you want to, have a big business, you want to address the whole market, but I would always say that the entrepreneurs who go wrong are the ones who basically then don't pay attention to the detail. The devil is in the detail, and basically going from $10 million to $20 million or 20 crores to 40 crores, focus on that and focus on it with EBITDA, right? And those are the businesses then that scale up and actually have the $1 billion dream come true.
Upasna, come in here. What do you sort of thoughts on scalability, and also, like Manisha said, it's about execution, but the holy grail is this unicorn tag that everybody seems to be chasing these days. How do you sort of, with the execution, with the hard work, also work on scalability?
Okay, so I think I have a fairly, divergent view here. So I don't think that people should chase the unicorn tag or decacorn tag or sunicorn tag or however many the, tags are in place, because those are momentary. And just because you have a sunicorn or a unicorn, or in recent cases we have seen even a decacorn status, doesn't mean that it's actually going to reflect when you, lead your or an M&A. So these are all like momentary, I would say, milestones. What resultant thing that you should look for is, what have I built? What impact is it creating? And is there a value associated with it long term? Because that is going to, really matter to the founders, to the shareholders, and to the employees, because that is going to result in sort of, large wealth and value creation for everybody. So that's sort of my perspective, that, don't chase valuations. In fact, I would also say don't chase money. It's a little bit like, dating. Like if you're too available, then nobody wants to date you. So it's better to have, there is some curiosity, people know about you, but, let them reach out, let them figure out what you are up to and how well you are doing. And that creates, I think, more stronger, inbound pull from long-term shareholder perspective also. I would also say, like, I was meeting some people here in New York yesterday, and, they kept asking me that, how have you reached this scale by having raised, only this much money? So just to give everybody a little bit of background, MobiKwik today does payments, does digital credit, does saving products. And so in a way, it's almost become like a digital banking platform where we are not a bank, but we are sort of the front end distributing these products to middle India across, like Manisha was saying, a lot of growth is now coming from tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 cities and towns of India, where these people are banked, but they don't actually get, when they walk into a bank and say that, Meko, 40,000 rupees ka loan chahiye, you don't get it, even though you are banking with them for many years. Or if you say that, I'm not happy making money in a fixed deposit or savings account, but I don't have too much money, I have just, 1 lakh rupees. Can you advise me on how I can make more money? So most of India is not financially savvy. They don't know what is a debt fund. They don't know what is a money market fund. And what are those products which are less risky, but where you can make higher yield. So, they're not able to get served on that either from their banking institution. It's not that the bank doesn't want to help everyone. The bank wants to help everyone, achieve their financial goals. It's just that at those ticket sizes, they can't make money. And they don't have, strong tech AI enabled tools that can create self-service products for people. So I think that's the role fintech in India is playing. And, MobiKwik is one of them. Long story short, We are today at about 140 million users and about 4 million merchants and a revenue scale of $150 million. And there aren't, and also profitable, PAT level profitable now for last 2 quarters. So there aren't too many companies, in our situation in India, whether private or listed. And so, or rather the companies that are there in consumer space that have reached more than 100 million users have all raised, upwards of $200 million. And MobiKwik has only raised $140 million because we bootstrapped the first 4 years of our existence. So in a long-winded manner, what I'm trying to say is raise money when you know what you are building. You need some capital to scale, hire the team, create the right resources in place so you can scale. But don't raise money because there's easy money available. Like if you have a business plan which means which says that you need $30 million, then maybe raise 30. So zyada mil rahe hain to raise 40, but don't raise 100 million. That's just ridiculous. You don't even know why you are reducing your shareholding in your own company. So that's sort of been my thesis, that scale can only come from the founders evolving at different scales in their business. I'm definitely a big believer in using technology and engineering skills. This is the cheapest way to build something instead of hiring enormous number of people and opening so many shops or branches. And the world may be talking about Gen AI, but I think that even fundamental financial products, or for that matter, even basic services like we have seen, food delivery, travel, everything can be digitized and made efficient. And we are a country of 1.4 billion people, so we need efficiency a lot more. I also don't get why a lot of players, who scale up, they hire like armies of people, like 5,000 people, 10,000 people. I don't get it. I don't think internet companies should have so many people. So as you scale at every step, you will add up people, but keep a check on that. Like your employee cost should not be a very large percentage of your overall revenue. So my focus has been that founders should, bring in the right people to help them to build out the muscle that you don't have. Like you may start with one muscle, you may be very good in marketing or sales, or you as a company, or you may be very good in technology, so you don't have all the other muscles. So build out those muscles, because you need all the muscles. You need finance muscle, you need marketing muscle, you need sales muscle. So yeah, I mean, allow yourself the time to build out the muscles so that you can sort of take your product or service to the right level of scale where it can serve several consumers, enterprises, depending on what you're doing, B2C, B2B.
Thank you.
And one more point, sorry, I've taken too much time. I want to reiterate what Manisha said. I think that, the startup ecosystem has sort of scaled up very rapidly in the last 3-4 years in India. And I'm extremely happy about that, so many women and also men are sort of trying their luck, trying to do something very challenging, build a new product or service. So that's very exciting. But I also think that the first thing you must evaluate yourself on and your founder team on is that you can't be a founder if you can't operate at the 100,000 level, the 50,000 level, the 30,000 feet level, and the 100 feet level. You need to be able to operate at all levels depending on what situation you are in. So I think that is important, and you may have that ability to do that in a couple of areas. You may not have the ability to do that in all areas, and that's where you need either founder team or a leadership team who can help you do that.
Okay. Upasna, Naya, I'll come back to you. I'm told Manisha has another engagement for which you need to leave slightly early. So I'll come back to some of these scale and product questions in a bit. Manisha, before sort of you have to leave us, because you're positioned between founders and, the investors, I want to ask you that we've seen several startups floundering on governance issues recently, right? And what it does to the business, it does more for the ecosystem, right? Because the perception changes for investors, for consumers, everybody. Where do you see the founders are floundering or going wrong when it comes to getting the governance right?
I think it's what we discussed. It was basically the breakneck speed at which companies were growing, and which, investors were basically in a way also a part too, because everyone just started playing that multiple of revenue game, right? And as that happened, you basically had this huge pressure to keep growing for all the reasons that I mentioned before. Excess liquidity, companies wanted to capture it, investors wanted their companies to become the unicorns, whatever it is. So I think all of that basically led to a crash landing. Having said that, has this not happened in sectors before? We've been through the whole bankruptcy and NCLT process, and the biggest of conglomerates that I started my career with don't exist anymore, right? Their crown jewels have been sold out to other companies. So this does inevitably happen. I am not condoning it, but I'm saying that this does happen in a sector which grows too rapidly and sees excessive liquidity. And in this case, especially because everything became a game of chasing revenue and multiples through revenue. So does this create a huge impact on the sector? I think it does create noise. Let's not take away from that. That obviously, if you're a new founder today looking to raise capital or a Series B, Series C, there will be conversations around this. Does it impact the whole ecosystem in India? Absolutely not, right? I mean, I think for all the reasons, as I mentioned before, the opportunity is so big, and and as a founder, if you have the right model, you have the right business model, you have the right execution capabilities, the money will come, right? But I think some of this noise could have been avoided, but I don't think it's basically at any point said that people are just completely now writing off the Indian ecosystem because of what's happened. The ones that happened are large, but don't forget, as I said, there are 90,000 startups in India. So 3 gone wrong doesn't mean that we just need to get very worried about the rest.
Okay, Upasana, like Manisha said that it's not the reality for every sector, but what we've in India seen that legacy businesses, which we are a very promoter-driven business environment, right? You interact with private equity, venture capitalists, and private capital per se now, right? You've raised that, you interact with those people. The hope was that the new age startup ecosystem will be better than the predecessors, the legacy businesses that we have seen, where evergreening of loans, etc., was the problem, right? You thought that today's new age startups will be more accountable because of private capital. What has your experience been on this? And do investors have also a share of blame to take on this?
So yeah, I mean, firstly, I would like to say that the new economy businesses are definitely far different in terms of culture, governance, and how they are run. I don't think that just a few examples of bad apples can be used to paint a brush on the entire economy. And one thing I would definitely want to say is that, see, there are very few startups at every scale, early stage, mid stage, late stage, that get extremely high hype, and that hype is built out by those founders itself. And then that results in them attracting excessively large amounts of capital and the kind of investors who want to do, large rounds and large secondaries. And those are sort of the companies where you see the old school, old economy type of things happening. What I'm trying to say is that 95% of startups are firstly not profitable. Because you're not profitable, there is no way you are going to get, debt. You mentioned the old economy example where the company is listed and the promoter shares are pledged, and against that they have taken loans, and then that they are using to start a new business, etc., etc. It's like one business to the second to the third, everything is linked in a chain economy. That can't happen because most startups, don't get debt easily. Equity is also extremely hard. And then most startups are also not doing, or even before the current so-called funding winter, most startups are not able to do large secondary rounds, which is why, the founders of the teams, don't have access to too much liquidity until there is a large, let's say, an M&A or a IPO event. So I don't think that we can say that all startups that are being built in India, don't have, efficient boards, don't have proper financial controls, and they are not doing their audits on time. In fact, most startups and their boards make sure that they finish their financial reporting by August or September for every March ending financial year. So I don't necessarily say that I don't think that I can say that there isn't a difference. The the accountability, the pay for performance culture that is there in technology startups is definitely, there. It's very much like the Silicon Valley culture, where if you do well, doesn't matter what your degree is or whether you are a dropout, you will scale fast. Versus, if you have the right degree, the right, things to show on your resume, but if you walk into a startup and after 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, you're not able to show impact, then you'll get shown the door. So the accountability and efficiency and productivity is still extremely high in new age startups, is what I would like to say. Of course, there have been, a few swings on the governance side, but I think a lot of shakeout is happening now, and I think that will create a culture where new startups will realize that they need to be strong on governance from day one, and they cannot, let it, be an afterthought.
Naya, you want to come in here before I close this topic on what are those internal policies, let's say approaches that startups can take from day one to inspire investor confidence, and B, also be IPO ready, which maybe today becomes 18 months, 12 months ahead of your debut, but the road to that then becomes easier.
So I want to go back to your previous question on scale, right? Because that is a very integral part of how do you get ready for IPO in the first place, right? I think something that everybody talked about, and I agree with all the points, but one important, very, very basic, very boring point is the whole point of unit economics, right? I think too many companies have scaled in the past without having a very close eye on the unit economics and seeing if we scale, will it work? And earlier it was about put in the money, put in the growth capital, capture the market, be the one sort of dominant player in the market regardless of how much cash you're burning, because that was the sort of, the sentiment I think a lot of investors gotten from the US examples, right? Saying that, oh, capture the markets, you will figure out a way to make your unit economics work. Honestly, that works in some sectors. It does not work in the majority of them. You have to keep a very, very close eye on unit economics because you can't scale what will fail. So I think that is one big piece around, understanding how do you go back and really make your business work. The second piece is if you think about the mentality of the founder, I think you asked a very important question right now about legacy businesses versus new age enterprises, right? I think it is such an incredible time to be in India, to be an entrepreneur in India, because it's actually a very, very democratic time. When we all grew up, right? And our parents grew up in an economy which was, agar aapka baap businessman ho, then you will take over the family business and you have a shot at business. Otherwise, what were the options? We could be in the service, or we could be doctors, or we could be lawyers, right? And even whatever. Entrepreneurship was never a feasible option. Today, look at all of us, right? I'm a first generation entrepreneur. How many of you are entrepreneurs in this room? Please raise your hand. I'm assuming most of you are first generation as well, right? And the reason that is open to us, I think, is such a privilege because venture capital exists, because people have started accepting and mainstreaming entrepreneurship as a narrative, as a tangible option we can take up, right? And of course, because the tailwinds of the beautiful economy that we have and the economic growth we have before us is at play. So, what does it mean? It means that mentally, a lot of us first generation entrepreneurs also need help. We've never been entrepreneurs before. We've never seen entrepreneurship. We've never had dining table conversations in entrepreneurship, right? We don't know what it is to take external capital, to have a board, right? To basically be accountable to shareholders. None of us have grown up with this conversation. Frankly, our schools, it never happens. Colleges, never happens. Homes has never happened, right? So I think the second piece I want to talk about is that it is important that, a lot of informal, formal networks, and especially boards, right, play an extremely important part in shaping the entrepreneurial ecosystem, but also specifically the entrepreneurs that they are backing. I've had the privilege of having had amazing boards, both at Baby Chakra and now the Good Glam Group, right? And every time we are basically trying to figure out a yay or a nay, right? We go to the board and it's it's truly a sounding board, right? And I think the important thing as entrepreneurs is to be extremely transparent, extremely open with our board members. Geeta talked about a beautiful example of her a founding team member, moving on. I've had a similar example, right? And I think the board has basically then backed me in my previous venture. So you've seen, if you're transparent with the board and if you basically are able to set a series of norms, if you will, and values, and if the board kind of aligns with your value and your mission statement, right, I think magic can happen. And, you don't need the processes and the policies and governance. But I think the third piece is also to have importantly, at very early levels, to have a very, very clear CFO defined and demarcated. You know, many times the founder will try to save money and say, "Are you know, like CFO ki zarurat nahi hai. Main CFO, main CEO, main CEO," right? I think there is something to be said about how do you put in someone professional very, very early on who takes on the role of your, CFO can also kind of sometimes, balance with CEO, but those values, I think that mentality doesn't match normally. But someone who actually errs on the side of caution, right, is extremely cautious, puts all the governance, the policies, the board reportings, the accounting, the timely statements, etc., all in place. And I think that investment is something that I think more and more entrepreneurs are now realizing is a very critical one at every stage of the business. And I think that's something we are all over-indexing on, which was not the case earlier, I'd say.